In the last phase of World War II, when Nazi Germany was cornered and on the verge of defeat, Allied troops entered its territory. The Germans prepared for a long season of suffering, knowing that under siege they would starve and their cities would be reduced to rubble. That was the nature of warfare, so they resigned themselves to a life of hardship. However, what a large part of the German population did not fully imagine was that many Allied soldiers turned towards them full of hatred and resentment. The desire of these men was to avenge Hitler's crimes, and they did not care that many Germans were civilians unrelated to the Wehrmacht. The Allies were willing to do anything to make up for it, and that included abusing every woman in their path. In the next few minutes, we will tell you all about the horrible torturing of German women at the hands of the Allies. By early 1945, the enemies of fascism were aware that victory was on their side, and the Axis was only delaying the inevitable. As they approached the heart of Germany, the Allied soldiers became increasingly convinced that they were allowed to do whatever they wanted, since they were the victors. This idea was particularly valid for Soviet troops, who were burning with revenge after the Nazis invaded Russia with Operation Barbarossa. On that occasion, the Wehrmacht had razed numerous villages, committed brutal mass executions, and abused thousands of women. For this reason, the Red Army showed no mercy. Already in October 1944, when they crossed the border that separated Poland from Germany, they unleashed a massacre on the town of Nemmersdorf, killing 74 people. The testimony of a survivor shows the level of cruelty that was reached. Near the tavern there was a barn. There they crucified 2 women and nailed them to the doors. We even saw babies whose heads had been smashed off. Although the calculations of historians vary, there are those who come to estimate that up to 2 million Germans were subjected to all kinds of harassment, to the point that some were abused up to 70 times in a row when attacked by entire squads. The Allied troops did not make distinctions, and the victims could be from girls to old women. Years later, a Red Army veteran related his feelings this way: "We were young, strong, and we hadn't had sex for 4 years. So we caught the Germans we found." Sometimes 10 men abused the same woman. There weren't enough women, since rumors of what we were doing spread and the population fled from us. Therefore, we had to be content with girls of 12 or 13 years of age. If she cried, we would put a rag in her mouth to shut her up, and we thought it was funny. Now, I cannot understand how I was able to do such a thing, I, who had been brought up in a good family. According to current research, 240,000 German women died as a result of these assaults, and in the years that followed, a large number of survivors committed suicide, unable to process the trauma. Joseph Stalin's attitude towards the crimes of his troops was rather lax. On one occasion, when a Yugoslav politician complained about the Red Army's violations in his country, he was chilled by the Soviet leader's response: "We repressed our soldiers too much, we must let them have a little initiative." We have to understand that a man who walks thousands of kilometers between blood, fire and death, then wants to have a little fun with a woman. In any case, sexual abuse was never officially sanctioned within the communist ranks, and continued to be considered a crime that could be punished. Even so, those punished were a minority, and the vast majority of abusers got away with it after receiving a tepid reprimand. Let's look at the testimony of a former Soviet combatant to understand what was going through his head as he committed these chilling acts. "Every time we occupied a village, we had 3 days to abuse and loot as much as we wanted. This was not legal, but we had the implicit permission of the officers to do so. After the 3rd day, one could be tried by a military court if he was found red-handed." I still remember the vision of a German woman abused, naked, with a grenade between her legs. Now I feel ashamed, but not at that time. It was not easy at all to forgive the Germans. We hated their houses in perfect condition while ours had been destroyed. I wanted to see them suffer, I needed to see their tears. It took decades until I started to feel sorry for them. The troops that invaded Germany brought with them various diseases, which very soon spread to the local population. Chaos engulfed German society, as they were not only being murdered and tortured by the Allies, but were also affected by the sudden increase in venereal disease, dysentery, and typhus. On the other hand, paranoia took hold of the people, and the husbands of some abused women accused them of having allowed themselves to be abused. Other German women were insulted and beaten in the street by their own compatriots, who believed that they had not been actual victims of sexual violence, but had consented and were working as spies for the Allies. We must remember that it was not only the Soviet soldiers who committed these crimes, but the Americans, the British and the French were also responsible. In the case of the US Army, there were laws that prohibited soldiers from fraternizing with German women, with the aim of not generating effective ties that would prevent them from carrying out their work properly. However, many men found an unusual way to evade this rule, which consisted of abusing women, but without speaking to them. According to this perverse logic, this was how they could satisfy their desires without any sentimental ties involved. Officers arrested soldiers found abusing a woman, but generally turned a blind eye unless the perpetrator was an African American. In that case, it was certain that he would be tried by a military court and shot. Some men, after having tortured a German woman, left her a gift or a ration of food as an apology for the crime. In this way they avoided seeing their acts for what they were, and considered it an exchange of sexual favors for something material, that is, as a prostitution service. British troops are estimated to have committed few abuses compared to their American and Soviet counterparts. British officers severely prosecuted sexual offenders as they believed their inappropriate behavior could inspire other men and set off a chain reaction that would destroy army discipline. However, this was not always the case, as shown by the situation in Hanover, which fell within the British occupation zone. This town plunged into anarchy when the English troops, who were supposed to guard the region, dedicated themselves to robbing the houses and abusing the women. As we see, the Allies left an extensive blood trail during the invasion of Germany. War brought out the worst in troops and turned men into monsters accustomed to a brutal and savage way of life. The result of the mass rapes was the suffering of the German female population, as well as the birth of thousands of illegitimate children. In the following years, they were designated as outcasts and despised by their compatriots, thus perpetuating their pain. We have reached the end of the video and we want to ask you, what do you think of the crimes committed by the Allies? Leave us your answer in the comment box below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history.